Okay, Keith Villanueva, man, thank you so much, man, for accepting the invitation. And well, it's always an honor, to have somebody that's one of the first students of Renzo Gracie, back in the day, and uh, an old school student of his. It's always a pleasure to talk with, and yeah, man, thanks for everything.
I appreciate you asking me to come on here. That's for sure.
Yeah, man. Hey, it was because of Carlos, man. Carlos
Yeah.
contacted you, way back, and yeah, man, we spoke before, and yeah, man, finally here. So yeah, man, how's everything going with you?
Everything's good. Got to make the best of every situation, right?
Yeah, exactly, man. It's a tough time right now, so something that I've learned, man, during this year, this crazy year, is just to accept the facts, and don't, if you cannot control something, it's just leave the anger like behind and just focus on the positives, because if you're angry all the time and this this coronavirus is ruin everything, I mean, it doesn't help you either way.
Yeah.
So yeah, man. So how's
Good thing
everything been with
good.
you lately with in New York?
Same thing. I'm in a city where it's ran by people that, trying to make life hard. But the good thing with jiu-jitsu, it teaches you how to make the best out of any situation, right? If
Exactly.
somebody got your back and they're about to choke you, the best thing you could do is relax and work your way out instead of panicking and then just tapping out, right? Unless you are being choked. But otherwise, you try to relax and just try to look at the situation and try to figure out what's your best options, So it's okay. I've written a book in the last 5 weeks, so I made the best of my time.
Wow. Awesome,
Yeah.
man. Yeah, no, it's yeah, you said it's a difficult now in New York, especially, with the people that are running the state of New York, yeah, I see a lot, I see a lot of stuff, and I mean, here in Spain, it's the same. It's a socialist country. Spain is a socialist country. Something that the people of the United States don't really like. That's something that I learned.
Yeah. Well, most people here don't really even understand what that is, so
No.
they kind of are trying to embrace it, which is crazy, because once you're in it, you can't get out. So
Yeah.
yeah, hopefully the thing is, most people don't educate themselves about history. So that's why it repeats itself when you're not sure of what's going on. So the most important thing is trying to really, I mean, during the time of the lockdowns, people should have really started to look at history and viruses and all this stuff to really educate themselves, because a lot of the stuff on the media is propaganda, unfortunately, to push
Yeah.
an agenda. So, that's just the way it is, unfortunately, right?
Yeah.
You have to take the power into your own hands and do your own research.
Exactly.
So same thing with jiu-jitsu. Nowadays there's a million schools. Doesn't mean that they're all equal.
Yeah.
So you have to look for what's best for you, whether you want to learn self-defense, mixed martial arts, gi, no gi, so it's all, jiu-jitsu comes back to everything with life always.
Exactly. I mean, well, in Henso's you can find everything. That's for sure.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
still remember the first time I met Renzo. It's just like, it was so long ago, but
I was
those
gonna
memories.
ask you about that. I was gonna ask you about that. You know, tell me, man, how were your beginnings, man, in martial arts, uh, and yeah, man, how did you discover jiu-jitsu, and how did you meet Henzo? Tell me a little
Okay.
bit how you started.
Hmm. Okay. Well, the one thing for sure I think is I started with Renzo in 2 weeks after his fight against Oleg Tatarov.
Ah, so 2 weeks after Tsunami joined.
Probably. Yeah, I know John's been there since the beginning too. I don't know who was there first, but I know like Harley just got his self-branded revenge across his chest.
Wow.
So he'd bring in crazy videos and stuff. But I remember going there for the first time, and Renzo's just, he's never changed. He's always been very friendly and just very giving. And even if you meet him for the first time, it's like you've known him forever. It's just, you know, that's just that he is very inviting and friendly, which is very different from the other Gracies that I've met in California. Because I was in California in the Marines. And then when I left, because I grew up in New York, but I was in California when I was in the Marines, and I studied martial arts there. But when I came back is when I really started with jiu-jitsu with Renzo. And I remember the first time meeting him, he went to go shake my hand. He's like, oh, wait, I can't shake your hand because his hand was broken from hitting Oleg Tatarov, because back then it was no holds barred, there was no gloves. So he broke his hand on his face. He's like, oh, I can't shake your hand, but just come here and then sit down on the mat, and then just started telling us stories and stuff. And I was like, wow, this is crazy. You know,
Wow,
it was so awesome. But with martial arts, I started when I was 7 years old. So the thing is, I think most of the people in the beginning that came to Renzo's were most people were accomplished martial artists already, whether it was karate, wrestling, judo, you know, because those are the people that knew, you know, more about jiu-jitsu, what was going on before it became as popular it is now, which nobody ever, you know, conceived of that happening to the magnitude that it is now, you know. So like I did karate when I was a kid. I was a boxer as a teenager. I did Muay Thai, kickboxing. I studied Jeet Kune Do. And I went to California. I went to the Dan Inosanto Academy. So my main teacher there was Yuri Nakamura, who is a shoot fighting, shoot wrestling. So he's the one who started the Value 2 of those Japans because he was friendly with Hickson.
Yeah.
So that style of fighting was more of a high, that was like probably one of the first real mixed martial arts out there. So it was really focused on Muay Thai, takedowns, and leg locks. So you had a lot of these submissions, but they didn't teach you how to get into the position, you get to the submission, and there was no defense. So it had a lot of holes in it, you know? So I noticed the guys that fought really well were all the people that studied jiu-jitsu, but they didn't say it. They didn't tell you, you know? So
Okay.
I know Eric Paulson at the time was taking privates with Hickson, Gracie, and then a few guys like Ed Wedding and this guy, Justin Williams, they were taking classes with the Machado brothers, because at that time in California, it was still early, you know, it was 95, 96, well, yeah, around, yeah, mid-90s, where the Machados were all still together and teaching. So a lot of guys who were doing really good with the mixed martial arts then, they all were studying jiu-jitsu. It's impossible not to, because no other system has all the answers like jiu-jitsu does.
Wow.
You know, yeah. So before I went to Renzo's, because I was in the Marines, I was stationed in 29 Palms, California. So I used to drive 3.5 hours to go to the Dan Inosanto Academy to train 2 classes on Saturdays and then drive 3.5 hours back.
Oh.
And I wanted to take jiu-jitsu. So I remember I went to the original Torrance Academy when Hoist and Horion were teaching. And I took a class, an intro class with Horion, and I loved it.
How was it there? Like, yeah, man, you're the first one that I know that it has been like in Torrance, man, and especially now back in the day, man. How was that like?
It was like, I'm not starstruck usually, but you know, meeting Hoist, Horion, Hickson, and Renzo, and Dan Inosanto, those were like, you know,
yeah,
big moments for me. But I remember going there, and that's when Horion was still teaching. So I took an intro class, and I wanted to take a class, but I lived so far, and I was in the Marines where I can't come religiously, you know, every week. I'd be, you know, 2 classes in one day on every other week, just because I lived so far away, you know. And it was still expensive back then, even though it was the mid 90s. It was still about $125 a month for 1 class a week. So
wow.
It was never cheap. And even back then in Horion school, even if you took a private with a blue belt, it was still $80 for the hour back in the mid 90s, you know. Wow. So it wasn't cheap. So I took a class with Horion. I loved it. And then it's funny, I was going downstairs to wait for a friend, and Ed O'Neill was waiting for his private with Hoist. So it was just like, you know, it was just that place was definitely a pinnacle in jiu-jitsu history in America, because that was the first place it's a first jiu-jitsu school, really, you know. So the thing that happened is in 96, I was getting out of the Marines and coming back home to New York. So the bad thing with Horion, he would keep putting out there that we're the only ones that teach the real Gracie Jiu-jitsu. Nothing else is the real thing, only us. So, you know, you get a little brainwash, right? Like with the media, and start to go, is this true? Is this not? So I wanted to go to the school before I drove back to New York from California to ask them, is Renzo, you know, does he teach the right thing? You know, of course he does, but, you know, I don't know anything. So I wanted to go and ask. And then that weekend that I went there, Royce and Horion were not there. You know, they were on away doing a seminar. So the top students that he had there that were Americans, the highest was a 4-stripe blue belt. And pretty much back then, stripes didn't really exist on belts. We didn't have them at Renzo's back then, you know. So those were the guys who were running the school. So I told him I wanted to ask a question to Horion, and he's like, well, he's not here. He goes, do you train? I go, well, I do shoot wrestling. He's like, you want to roll? I'm like, yeah, hell yeah. You know, I want to test myself. I'm 22 years old. You know, it's like, let's go for it. So he's like, oh, you have a gi? I'm like, no, I don't wear a gi, you know. So he's like, oh, you can't come upstairs to the big mat unless you have a gi on. I go, so how do I do that? And he goes, $10. And back then I was in the military. It's like $300 every 2 weeks. It's tough to live off of, but I couldn't say no to the challenge. So I was like, okay, got me a gi for the $10 to rent. Went upstairs. I remember rolling with like a 3 or 4 stripe blue belt. And right away I got his back and choked him out. You know, I don't know Gracie Jiu-jitsu yet, you know? So I'm like, wow. And I asked the guy, how long you been here? He goes, oh, 3 years. And then another guy, I get his back, I choke him out. He's been there for 4 years, you know? And then 2 other people I went with, one guy got him in a heel hook. Back then they didn't know what it was, but in shoot wrestling, that's what you did. And he turned the wrong way and you hear his knee snap. And then another guy went against, I got him in a knee bar and he hobbled away. And then the guy who was in charge, I think his name is John Brock. He's a 4-stripe blue belt. He was probably one of the top students there, still teaching. So he's like, oh, come here, let's roll. I go, okay. And he just goes up to me, grabs me by my neck, and I tap. I'm not Superman. I didn't know what anything was with the gi.
Yeah.
So I was like, wow, these guys have been training for this many years. And I only know from a little bit that I've, you know, seen on video or something, but not much. So now I leave there. But before I left, I go, do you guys know who Renzo? Oh my God. If I could train with anybody, I would be with Renzo. So I was like, okay, good. Because, you know, there was only 2 choices in New York back then. There's Fabio Clemente, who was associated with the Machados, and Renzo Gracie. That's it.
Marcelo wasn't there yet.
Oh, no way. No.
Oh, no.
Marcelo was, you know, not even known yet within the jiu-jitsu world for competing in America yet, you know, because back then we didn't have internet yet. Or just started. So we didn't have YouTube, we didn't have DVDs. It's like, you know, the only instructional out there was Horion Gracie's, you know, Brazilian Jiu-jitsu, you know, Gracie Jiu-jitsu Basics 1, and the video series that Renzo did with Craig Kukuk.
Yeah.
So those are the only 2 legit like videos, you know, VHS back then.
And the tapes of Tsunami that he used to bring to the academy.
What's that?
The videotapes that Tsunami used to record as well.
Mm-hmm. And then the funny thing is too, I'll go fast forward a little bit. Renzo did a second series using Matt and Nick Serra. I was behind the scenes for the whole entire thing because I was new. So if I couldn't see the right angle, I would say, well, guys, I'm a new guy. I don't know what you guys are doing from that position. So I kind of helped them from a beginner standpoint to help with the angles and stuff like that for that series that Renzo did. But the thing, when I got back to New York, I went right to Renzo's right away. That day I met him was when he had his broken hand, because I actually have a book because I used to write down everything we did in class all the time.
Oh, wow.
So I still have it. And
awesome.
I know I started my first class was on December 7th. Yeah, right. 1996. Can you see it?
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah. So
wow, man, that's historic.
I'm thankful I didn't lose it or anything like that.
No, man, don't lose that.
but I remember, leaving Torrance Academy. I did go visit Hickson. So that's that picture that you put up. I got to at least meet Hickson once back then. But then when I got to Renzo's and I started to train there, I remember going with a couple of guys and it's like they're blue belts already. And I couldn't do anything against them. Yeah, I was young, I'm strong, athletic, but I couldn't do anything. And I remember one of the guys, George, I'm like, George, how long have you been training? He goes, 6 months. 6 months. I was destroying guys who've been training for 4 years at the Torrance Academy, and you guys have been only training 6 months. That just showed the level of jiu-jitsu that Renzo was teaching, and a lot of stuff from the basics. Renzo would show us a better way of doing it, where he's like, yeah, that's how you teach, but for fighting and stuff, this is not the way to do it. So in my eyes, Renzo, if you could take Carlson Gracie, who made Mario Sperry, Merla Bustamante, and that whole team, Renzo's the one who took the torch of that type of mentality and passed it on to his American students. Because it's like it almost was at a time where if you weren't a Gracie, you weren't learning the real jiu-jitsu. And Renzo shared it with us right from the beginning.
Yeah. And from your teammates back in the day, who were the ones that were the most there? I know a lot. Well, I've heard a lot of them. Carl Massaro, John Danaher, Matt and Nick Serra, Tsunami. I mean, I'm sure there's many stories you can tell, man, because you were with them back in the day. If I'm not well, I guess So yeah, how was it like with all those people rolling during the 90s, early 2000?
Yeah, well, when I just got to the academy, Nick and Matt just received their purple belt, probably like a week before I got there, So Matt would teach the morning classes and Saturday morning with Nick. And then Vinny was there. I don't know his last name, but I know he was from Gracie Baja. So he was there. And then not too long after, all of a sudden you had two guys come, that we didn't know who they were yet. And both of them seemed to have some type of meniscus surgery, on their knees. So you have these two guys that come, they're sitting down on the other end of the mat, just hanging out, icing their knees, not really training or anything. And it's like, okay, who are these guys? Why are they here? Their knees are hurt. Why are they here? It happened to be Rodrigo Gracie and Ricardo Almeida. So yeah, it was just it was just amazing. And then at that time, it was still pure jiu-jitsu versus the world, So Matt and Nick were always getting ready to go compete and go fight. So I sent you a video of Matt and Nick's first fight. It was called Bama. It was in New Jersey. And back then that stuff was still illegal here. So they disguised it as, what do you call it? A grappling exhibition. Even though there's punches and kicks and stuff. So, the way it was also back then, pretty much every school across America did only the gi. Renzo's school was the first one that had 3 days with the gi and 3 days without the gi, 6 days a week. So a lot of people were coming there. Most of us, I know myself, I didn't go there to try to be the next world Mundal champion. I went there to be an NHB fighter. That was my goal. Because back then it wasn't even mixed martial arts. There was no holds barred. So we were there when Renzo was training for all those fights in Japan, one in Brazil, so it was pretty amazing time. And back then also, the classes were always 3 hours.
3 hours.
3 hours every class. Renzo taught every night. The first hour was stand up. So if we were doing striking and taking somebody down where they're trying to take your head off, that was it. Or we're doing takedowns. And then anybody would just ask Renzo, how do you do this? And he'd show us the takedown. It wasn't so structured. You just ask him and he'd just help you. And then the second hour was technique. So it's funny where some people say, oh, now we have systems, right? We have flow charts and all this and that. Renzo did that automatically. He didn't label it anything. Renzo would show us a chain of moves. So if you go for a certain sweep and a person puts their hand on, you go for this armbar. They turn this way, you go for this. So usually he would show us like 3 things back to back that follow up. And this was something new every day. So imagine how much knowledge you had within just a short period of time. So you'd have an hour of drilling the moves, and then by then you have an hour to roll. And most of us would be there religiously from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. Monday through Friday, if we could.
Yeah. Wow, man. It's yeah, something that your friend Carlos told me once is that, like when you went there, there was always somebody, to roll, and like maybe somebody would come up that, like, yeah, like you said, there weren't no schedules or anything like we see nowadays, and that Renzo, for example, would come and say, hey, come on, technique, or Ricardo Almeida or whoever was doing the class. And yeah, man, it's been an evolution, man.
Ricardo, I mean, Ricardo was like one of the first people I was just like blown away, where he would usually come to the academy and show Renzo stuff, and the thing is, it just shows how Renzo is. Renzo was like, never was like, oh, how could you show me I'm the best? It's like Renzo's like, let me see what you figured out. Oh man, let's try it. Oh, we can make it better like this. So Renzo's always been open-minded, and Ricardo always was an amazing teacher, from the beginning also. So yeah, I mean, there you would have people that would stay and train all the time. Sometimes you take a little break. I know there's been times where I was sitting with John Danaher and we're just watching like Rodrigo go with Renzo or Matt or whatever. And, we're trying to analyze what's going on. Because now, I mean, the thing is, back then, you didn't have YouTube. You didn't have you didn't have BJJ fanatics. You didn't have any of this. So the only way you could get good is by watching high level people, or if you could get your hands on some black belt matches from Brazil, because that's the only place is jiu-jitsu, so me and John would watch a lot of stuff and, sometimes talk about things and try to point out what's going on. And I think, that type of thing has made John such an amazing teacher, because nobody put anything like on a platter for us. We would watch and figure things out. And I know from me teaching, I could notice a lot of subtle things from me not being spoon-fed everything. Plus, Renzo just has a way of teaching where he makes it simple, but it just broadens your horizon on every single thing within jiu-jitsu.
Wow, man. Yeah, it's definitely special. But now that you mentioned John Danaher, what's your take on him? Like, what do you think that he has done for the jiu-jitsu community? And like, why do people see him like as a special, jiu-jitsu person that, he's made a lot of stars, and even George St. Pierre, he's been crucial in his career, and Chris Weidman as well. What's your, since you know him way back, what do you think what do you think that makes him different from other teachers across the whole world?
Well, I know John has put in so much time. It's like since day one, like he had a bad knee from the beginning, so sometimes he wouldn't train as much, but he's always like just there and watching and analyzing stuff. And the thing also at Renzo's, because of Renzo's personality, it's like everybody always came from everywhere to our school. People would travel from Brazil, to go to Renzo before a fight or whatever. So he was always there watching the top people, especially for in that era, training and stuff. So, and then also I think a great teacher is not somebody who forces you to learn moves. They try to see where you are at and tries to formulate a game that's good for you. So I think that's, one thing also that he does. And his whole life has been dedicated to jiu-jitsu. So also in 2001, I know these stories probably get repetitive from different angles, but in 2001, that's when Rodrigo Gracie and Matt Serra left the Renzo school to open up their own academies. So that's when Renzo asked Sean Williams and John to start teaching there. So back then that was like not only a big thing, it was a big responsibility. So it sounded like, oh, you want me to teach? Okay, no problem. It's like, you want me to teach at the Renzo Gracie Academy? It's like the best people come here. So I know that put pressure on them to up their game a little bit in a great way. Because then it's like, okay, how do I give the best jiu-jitsu to represent my teacher? So nobody ever took it lightly, where it's like, you kind of got it, So I know that kind of made John and Sean start to really look at things in a very different way, because now they're representing, the Renzo Gracie Academy. And the thing is also, you had Rodrigo Gracie there and you had Matt Serra there. So it's like, those are big shoes to fill,
Yeah.
So that's a lot of thing I had to do is like, okay, that's a lot of pressure, but you gave me this opportunity. I'm going to try my best. And that's what they did. So from that type of struggle in the beginning has made them, so great to what they've become for sure. And then also Renzo School was never known for a gi competition school. It was mostly for fighting. So that's why you had a lot more champions from no gi and MMA come out of Renzo School, because that was kind of like what the school's known for. Like earlier you said, if Marcel Garcia was around, definitely not yet, but like Marcel's school is more a competition school with the gi and no gi. Renzo's is like more competition for MMA and no gi. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I've watched the documentary. I've watched it like many times. The Renzo Gracie legacy. Yeah, it's. I mean, yeah, you can clearly see like what this school represents, and and it's what you said. That it's also made more. It's made for fighters. If you want to become a fighter, that's a place. And whether you want to do no gi, well, and even gi, I'm sure there's been a lot of gi champions. For sure. Yeah. I mean,
it covers every basis for sure.
Exactly.
Originally, the thing. So I think coming back to John, it's like John usually his normal uniform for gi was the gi top and shorts. So that was more of his look because of his knee and stuff. So I think it just became more of a focus of no gi stuff for the most part. I mean, we all competed with gi. I went to Brazil to compete in 2004 with the gi. It's like, we did everything, but it was still more of like almost like a fighting type of school. But then the thing is that happened is jiu-jitsu is for everybody, right? It doesn't matter who you are, female. So I think at one point in the early 2000s, Renzo and other people noticed it's like, why aren't we maintaining our student base? It's definitely the best school in the world. Why are we not maintaining? Because some people don't want to be fighters. So things had to start to change in a way a little bit so they could have everybody come and learn jiu-jitsu. So that's why, like, if you've been to the academy in the last couple of years, you could see it has a different type of structure that's more inviting to just everybody. Because jiu-jitsu is something that's life-changing, so why it shouldn't be just for a certain type of person or mentality,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I went this January. I couldn't meet Renzo; he wasn't there that day. But yeah, I took one of John's classes, and yeah, I mean, no words, man. But the philosophy, since I also come from a Gracie school here in Barcelona, it's very. They don't do any warm-ups or, you just warm up by yourself. It's like what we do here. Robin also, he teaches like his father did, and like, yeah, just the Gracie way, that's just pure class. And that's what I could identify, because I went from a Gracie school to another Gracie school. But like if I go, for example, to a Unity or another one or Atos, you see that difference. You know, it's a different approach. It's more maybe more sport jiu-jitsu. You know, and since we're mentioning it, now you know we've seen like jiu-jitsu becoming very. Yeah, of course, you know it's grown so much,
Well, it's
but
mainstream now.
yeah,
You know,
exactly, with flow grappling and BJJ fanatics and all of that. Um, do you think that like the self-defense is getting like you know less teached, just in general? You know, since you've been like in the beginning when jiu-jitsu started in America, how do you see how do you see the evolution uh, that the martial art has had you know during these last decades? And I mean, yeah, tell me something positive or negative, because I'm sure you
yeah.
know
Oh no,
people
I
have told
noticed
me.
everything that's changed so much. So, you know, like also since, you know, in the beginning with Renzo, our class was, you know, 3 hours. So, you know, for the first hour, you know, if you want to practice takedowns and stuff, you can. But if you said, Renzo, once if somebody gets you in the full Nelson, what do you do? Once if somebody grabs you like this, so Renzo would show it to us, but we just have to ask, you know.
Yeah,
And I think now you have so many people, you know, a martial art is a combative art, right?
yeah,
So you're learning how to defend yourself and how to fight. So if you're only learning the sport aspect, yeah, if you become somebody who's competing and stuff, yeah, you have an edge over anybody in the street, of course. But your mindset is very different. You know, you're not going to do a berimbolo on concrete.
you
You know,
imagine.
yeah. I mean, I'm not going to try to jump into an ashigarami on concrete because, like, somebody might come and run and soccer kick me in the head. You know, also, you know, we actually had a thing, you know, obviously in the early 90s where, you know, a bunch of guys went to go fight. And you know, Renzo had a partner at a time, you know, in the first school, because the blue basement is Renzo's fourth place,
Yeah,
not the first, you know. So he had a partner at first, and that broke up for all the right reasons for Renzo. And then he rented a place at a kung fu studio called Peggy's. That's what we should just call it. So he
yeah,
just rented space and he put the mats out, and that's where Renzo came up with the logo for, you know, the Renzo logo. So, and then from there he went to the place where we called the meth den, where it's like the only thing in the building where the picture with tsunami that you have downstairs was a meth clinic. So there's nothing in that building besides the jiu-jitsu and the meth clinic. And then from there he went to the blue basement. You know, so that was the fourth place. But in the first school, sorry, I lost my train of thought. What were we covering? This is when I'm going to get old. So
yeah. No, you can say, well, you know, just
oh no, with
whatever
the
you want.
self-defense. So the thing is, you know, we were learning how to fight from the beginning, and Renzo would show us self-defense. Now you have people that just do sports stuff, where if somebody grabs them in the street, they don't know what to do. If somebody gets into a fight with the person, they'll do jiu-jitsu, but they don't really know what to do. I mean, there's plenty of videos online. There's a video of a purple belt fighting, and it was horrible. It's like, and then coming back to the thing that I was trying to say earlier, see, I remember now. So we had a bunch of guys that went to go fight, and at that time we had only 4 purple belts. You know, so the other 2, I won't mention their names, but one of them fought, and he lost. Meanwhile, he had an amazing guard, very flexible, legs over the head, this type of stuff. And he lost. And it was a tournament. So then the guy that beat him fought another person from Renzo's school that was a white belt. That guy beat that guy. So how could you have a white belt beat somebody and not the purple belt, right?
Yeah,
So the thing is, that person had a very open, sporty guard, but it's not good for fighting. And the thing is, some people don't know the difference between the two. So when it comes to fighting, when it comes to self-defense and sport, there's a different mentality between definitely the sport and the fighting aspect.
Yeah.
And then if you take the fighting aspect and you go a little further and you go a street fight, there's a lot of different layers to that. Because I remember when I went to Pride 24, because I trained Rodrigo to go fight in there, and Renzo was there, Ricardo was there. And I remember in the back scene, you had some guys from the Lions then. That was Ken Shamrock's school. That's the person who fought Hoist to a draw, even though he held on to him the whole time. But one of the guys, Guy Mesger, I have a picture with him, and he had some bruises at the end. It's normal, so he just did a mixed martial art fight. And somebody's like, well, how did you feel? He goes, I don't know. I used to fight a lot in the streets in Texas. He goes, I get that adrenaline rush, and I have to be worried because it's a street fight. He goes, in the ring, there's rules. You could do this, you can't do that. And it's like, I don't feel that like adrenaline rush that will help me fight harder because I know I'm not going to die. So, all these things make a big difference. So when you have somebody that's just doing self-defense, but they never have somebody really grab them and resist, that was what Bruce Lee called the classical mess. Because now you're not learning how to really control somebody that's not being controlled, because most martial arts, everything is like you're letting the person do the moves. Jiu-jitsu, you learn it where the person lets you do it, but then there's resistance. So even with the self-defense, you learn it to a point where a person can be aggressive and you can still make it work. So it gives you, real confidence to use, and timing and sensitivity for the street. So that to be implemented into the self-defense. And then if you're doing no gi and you're doing it without strikes, that's fine if you're doing no gi. But now if you're doing, you should have it where it's a little taste of everything, just to give the person the complete idea of what jiu-jitsu really is. Because there's some people that is just so sport oriented where their students are not being equipped with jiu-jitsu that's going to help them in a real street competition. And that's the thing that's being lost, if anything, more now. And I think that's why Hickson keeps talking about it, And that's one thing that Renzo's really done with the Upper West Side School. He's implemented that into the curriculum where everybody's getting it no matter what, and it's less of a competition school, but it's very well-rounded in that type of way too, which is important because not everybody wants to compete. Not everybody wants to fight. I know we lost a few students at one point because one guy's like, I can't have my hand hurt. I'm a tattoo artist. My hand's hurt. How could I tattoo? Another guy, I can't have my shoulder hurt. I do construction. Another guy's a surgeon. So it's like some people don't want to do that, but they still want to learn jiu-jitsu for their mind, for their health. And it's like, it's the best life insurance in the world. So I think some places are so far off with everything where I feel, it's my own idea, but everybody should have a balance in their school where, in the beginning, you learn the self-defense stuff with the ground fighting and everything else. And then if somebody wants to go into this side for competition, that's fine. They want to go mixed martial arts, that's fine. They want to do no gi, but everybody should have a core base that represents the jiu-jitsu the way it should be represented. People are going to disagree with me. I couldn't care less, but that's, that's my own opinion. Because now the thing that is, everybody's so obsessed with no gi. Because why? Because that's the only thing you could really make a living doing. You look at all the world champions from the Mundials. It's like, with the gi, some of them, unless they have a school, they're not making much money. The people who are doing no gi can make a living off of it. So this has become more exciting for people. But then the thing is, it's happening is like, now everybody's getting so obsessed with the leg lock game. And they're not getting a balance of all the other stuff. And even John warns about it, but people don't listen because it's like, how do you do an ashigarami to this, to that? And it's like, what are you talking about? I don't speak like that. It's like, a triangle. It's like this. And it's like, it's like, why so many people, and like lapel guard, right? Some people are so focused on that where if you don't have a gi on, they have no jiu-jitsu anymore. So it's like trying to find a balance where you have a strong foundation and then you could go play in different directions, but the self-defense I think is so important because I have a friend who said a brown belt was in a match against a wrestler and the wrestler just had him in a headlock. He didn't know how to get out. You're a brown belt. How do you not know how to get out of a headlock? Right? So it's like, but then at the same time, you have to do some reflecting on yourself because like, whenever I used to compete, because back then, whatever came around, we all went to. It didn't matter. We all went and we tried our best. So it's like, I remember going against a wrestler. He's been wrestling since he's 4 years old, even though he shouldn't have been in that division. He sandbagged. But I'm like, okay, I need to work on my wrestling. So I started working on my wrestling. So instead of people just being focused on a certain, I guess, genre of jiu-jitsu, you should try to create, a system for yourself where you're getting the complete thing, at least, and then if you want to veer off, it's perfectly fine, but some people now are so obsessed with the fancy, exotic looking things from jiu-jitsu where
yeah,
you're not gonna be able to do that when you hit 50 years old. You're not going to be able to do it, maybe even in your 40s, where jiu-jitsu, the sport, you need to be athletic, but to do jiu-jitsu for self-defense or to defend yourself, you shouldn't have to be athletic to do that.
yeah. And now it's interesting that you mentioned it, because everybody's getting like, well, not everybody, but like, a lot of people are getting like, like fancy with the no-gi. Something that I noticed, I don't know if you agree, but since Gordon Ryan exploded, it's kind of like the no-gi got very, very, very viral. And yeah, I mean, I think he's like one of the guilty ones, that the no-gi world has exploded, and that all the money has come, um, yeah, I think, he's probably one of the one of the guys that has, transformed this like way of thinking. Or what's your take on that?
No, he has amazing jiu-jitsu. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then, one thing that Renzo, when John went to Renzo and asked him, what do I do with these guys that want to start competing? Renzo's like, the thing that most people aren't focused on is the leg lock game. So if you guys want to really dominate, focus on that, because everybody's going to be caught by surprise. And that's what happened. And that's fine, but it's like, the people are now so obsessed with trying, like, if you play basketball, in the 80s and 90s, who did you want to be like? Michael Jordan, right? Everybody wants to be like Mike. So now everybody who's coming into the no-gi game wants to either be like Gary, Tonin, or Gordon Ryan, right? It's normal. So they're like, okay, what's making them so great? And they're amazing teachers too. So it's not, so the thing is too, where like Renzo is not only an amazing competitor, he's was a brilliant teacher. John didn't get to compete because of his injuries, but he's a brilliant teacher. So, the thing that happens with anything, you could have somebody who's a great fighter, but not a good teacher, just because they couldn't actually do it. And you have some people, especially boxing coaches, they had glass jaws, they can't fight because they get hit, they get knocked out, but they became brilliant boxing coaches. So it's like what Gary and Gordon has become is not only the top competitors in no-gi, they're amazing teachers also. So, what they're doing for the sport, it's wheeling a lot of people, which is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But a lot of people are just focusing on the leg lock stuff. But when they went to John, I'm pretty sure that they were already black belts prior to going to John. So they already had a foundation. I think they came from either Tom DeBlas, I think his last name is.
Yeah, from Tom DeBlas, yeah.
No, I'm pretty sure. If I'm wrong, I apologize. But, they came from there, and then they went to John, to start competing. So they already black belts. So before John started to implement what he needed for them to be successful, they already had a strong foundation. A lot of people don't realize that part, where they're not just coming in. And the thing is, when it comes to the leg locks, of course, it's half your body. It's easy to grab. It's like, of course, there's a lot of things that make it high percentage. But, it's very easy for somebody that's new to end their jiu-jitsu journey quickly because of the leg locks. Because now if you learn it, you don't know how to control yourself, but what's the normal white belt, blue belt thing? It's like, I need to submit somebody. Once I could submit somebody, I'm learning jiu-jitsu. It's like, so next thing you know, it's like, what? Oh, that's a secret move, a heel hook. It's hard to get out of. You could hurt somebody. I'm going for that on everybody. And then they jump on the person and they crank fast and hard. and now that person's leg's broken, that person's knee is torn, and then that person's like, well, I'm not coming here to get my leg broken. I need to work tomorrow. You know, where when somebody's a beginner, it's a lot more easier to hurt somebody with the leg locks than it is for a lot of the other things. Of course, somebody could tear somebody's shoulder in a Kimura and stuff, but if somebody reacts the wrong way, usually with the arms, you're grabbing and then you get it and you might tap, you know, take a while to tap, but the leg locks, you turn the wrong way, you're tearing your own knee. So, you know, with this part, it becomes very dangerous. And it just, as you know, for a beginner, for sure, it might have ended a lot of people's jiu-jitsu journeys, which is a shame.
Yeah.
You know, so the thing is like, too, it's like you could be a blue belt and tap out a black belt. If you get them in a quick leg lock and the guy doesn't, you know, prepare, doesn't mean that you're black belt level. You got the move, you know, and people need to understand that jiu-jitsu is not about how many people you tap. You know, like, oh, I'm a blue belt, I tapped a purple belt. Am I getting my purple belt during the promotions? It's like, no, dude, you're not doing, you did the move, but jiu-jitsu is, you know, something that it takes time, and it's like the technique, it's not just finishing people. And then you have a lot of people where I'm seeing where they're trying to just hunt and kill everybody, trying to get these submissions, when it should be like something that, you know, you shouldn't be going so hard with your own teammates, unless you guys are ready to compete, but you try not to hurt each other still. Some people are trying to do stuff, and especially like at Renzo's now, it's the mecca of jiu-jitsu. So, you know, if you have all of John's DVDs and you're starstruck, what do you want when you go there? You want his attention. So if I could tap somebody or hurt somebody, you know, some people think like that, where I'll get his attention, and next thing you know, maybe I'll be part of his team or this or that. And then now you might have ended somebody's jiu-jitsu journey. You know, so the leg locks, nothing wrong with them at all. But I think at a certain level, that's when you start to implement them. You have a lot of people now who are new because they watch, you know, a lot of no-gi, and they're like, oh, I need to do leg locks because that will make my jiu-jitsu amazing. You know, that's the one thing that I've noticed a lot with the new generation compared to, you know, the way we started.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, you can see it in a very unique way, you know, because you've seen like the whole evolution, you know, since like the days of way back, you know, and now. But we were talking before, you know, about the other locations and all of that the academy had. I had Carl Massaro on an episode like this last summer, and he explained me that you guys were sharing like the school with ninjas as well, like the mats with guys that were like actually ninjas.
No, oh, I don't know, but if he wants to rent out his space, you know, because in the second school, you know, before Renzo got his own place, he rented a place at a Kung Fu studio.
Yeah.
So at the Kung Fu studio, you had ninjas there, you had Kung Fu people there, you had one guy, I think his name was Michael, he taught the Muay Thai, and that's who Renzo started learning Muay Thai from, you know, so, and then you had a mixture of everything, and that's where Renzo came up with the logo, you know, the lion head logo. So I remember he showed it to me at first. I go, oh, it looks like Thundercats. He goes, what's Thundercats? I go, it's a cartoon. He goes, I don't care, I like it. I go, don't do what you want. I go, it just, when he showed it to me, that's what I thought. But, you know, with in New York in general, the prices of rent is so high, where if you don't have a class from 7 to 10 and somebody wants to rent and pay for the space, maybe that's why it happened. But otherwise, it's not part of the school, that's for sure. You understand?
Yeah.
Because like yoga studios will rent out space for dance classes or capoeira or anything like that. So maybe, because I don't know what went on, but that would be my assumption. So we're not learning smoke bombs and disappearing, you know, with ninja suits. So I know that's not.
Yeah, I mean, like Carl, you told me the one day, like the ninjas, like some of them, they came like to train, and you know, some of the students of Renzo, they would ask like, "Oh man, could you do a technique of ninjutsu to me?" And they would say like, "No, because this could kill you." And Yeah, no, that's what they used to tell me. It was really, hey,
Well,
it's curious.
yeah. Well, the thing is too, it's like martial arts. Why did Horion start the UFC? So when you watch the first three UFCs, it's like, what did you see? This guy's a 28-year karate master, 8th degree, deadly dim mock touch. And it's like, next thing he gets punched in the face for the first time, he falls on his back and he's like, oh my God, this is crazy, Or like Hoist, the first guy that he fought was a boxer. And he had one glove on. And Horion's like, you sure you want to wear the glove? He's like, yeah, I don't want to hurt him. He's like, you don't have to worry about hurting my friend, And Hoist took him down and headbutt him a couple times. In boxing, you're not allowed to headbutt. So the guy's like, what the hell's going on? So it just showed whoever was brave enough to do the first few UFCs, it's like, it was style versus style. But there's still people have this cognitive dissonance where they don't want to believe it because they like the exotic stuff where it's like, oh, you're a ninja, the death touch. I want to learn that. Well, you can't use it because if you do it, you're going to go to jail for life if it worked. So why spend all these years doing something that you don't know how to use or it probably won't work? So, because a lot of martial arts is choreography. It's like the game of patty cake. If I don't do the same exact pattern you ask, we can't do the game. And a lot of martial arts is like that. And then also Bruce Lee called it the classical mess, where a lot of people are learning all these katas and forms, and it's perfect if you just want to do that. But for self-defense, how do you apply it in real life? So with jiu-jitsu, it's like, anything. What's the move? Let me see, do it. That's a delivery. Hopefully that don't ring too. Sorry. I don't have to ring.
No worries.
So it's like jiu-jitsu, you have to, the person shows you the move and you're like, okay. And you're like, well, let me give you a little resistance now. And it still will work because of the timing. A lot of other systems, once the person starts to give resistance, the move doesn't work. And the thing is, what styles other than jiu-jitsu are successful in the UFC in the beginning? Wrestlers, judo guys who did kickboxing. Why? Because you're fighting somebody who's not cooperating. Majority of the other martial arts, everything is through cooperation. And when that person doesn't cooperate, your move doesn't work. So then that system's a failure. Jiu-jitsu's never had that problem because whatever moves didn't work, they would take out of the system. Anything that, like Renzo would watch, wrestlers, sambo, anything. If he saw something that worked, he would try it and then see if there's any holes in it. And if there wasn't, that was a new move that he would show. So there's a lot of people who take martial arts and you're like, well, yours doesn't really work. And they're like, well, let's see. And then you prove it to them. But they spend so much money and time on that martial art that they don't care if it doesn't work. They're a believer. And that's their problem, not yours. Because even if you were like that and you're like, well, I'm an Aikido master, let me go against a jiu-jitsu person, and the guy beats me, it's like, and he's, just got his blue belt, that should be enough to say, okay, I'm going to start to learn some jiu-jitsu. But some people were like, well, I'm not enlightened yet. I can't do it yet. You might never become enlightened.
Yeah.
So, with ninjutsu and all these other martial arts, I'm not trying to knock them, but jiu-jitsu, always put yourself out there. And so did the Western martial arts, wrestlers, people who do judo, Muay Thai, so that's another thing that made jiu-jitsu so transferable for real fighting. Because, you're rolling with somebody, they're not just laying on their back, letting you do the choke. They're trying to get out of there. And you have to get the timing and everything else to get it,
Exactly.
Can you hold on 1 second? Is okay?
Yeah, sure, man.
Yep.
No
Right.
worries.
Sorry.
No worries, man. Okay, yep. So we were saying, man, yeah, all of this, that you guys shared with ninjas and with a lot of people, and I mean, I wanted to ask you, since it's something that I gotta bring up, man, because well, here in Spain as well, like when Robin opened his academy, there were a lot of people that, well, some people, they used to come, and challenge, to see if it was really effective. I'm very, very sure, and well, uh, um, well, like a lot of people have told me as well, that there were, and it's normal, a lot of people would say, okay, jiu-jitsu, let's see if it's really effective, and they would come and try to fight some of you guys. Do you remember a certain moment of one of those challenges that you remember now, and you said, man, that was that was one for the books?
With me or watching?
Yeah, watching or with you, it doesn't matter. Your favorite one.
I remember one guy came one night, and it was a guy who's like definitely a bodybuilder. I mean, like, definitely with steroids. And the guy was a monster. So Renzo put him against Marco. Marco's Brazilian. I don't know how exactly tall, but he's probably about Matt's height, So and he's a lot smaller than Matt, and he just destroyed this guy. Like Renzo's like, yeah, get on the mat, come on, let's see what you got. And he just destroyed the guy. And we were thinking, well, if somebody who's half your weight and not as strong, obviously, just dismantled you, you'd probably be a believer and come back. The guy never came back, So it's like, okay, that guy just kicked my ass and my big muscles didn't help, but it's like it's not on video, so I'm out of here, And then you'd have some people that come to the academy just to hurt people. So in 2001, when Sean and John started teaching and Rodrigo left, Rodrigo took me to go teach with him. So we had somebody come in who's security bouncer type of guy, and he's on steroids. I mean, somebody grow 50 pounds, and brag about it. It's not normal, unless it's all fat, but he wasn't. He was all muscle. And he was hurting a lot of the people, just grabbing them and twisting them and stuff, So usually when Renzo, if he wants you to go hard with somebody, he'd give you the look like, go with him,
Yeah.
So, because Renzo, some of us were mat enforcers, and I was happy to be one of those back then, when I was younger. So, Rodrigo didn't do that. He's like, Keith, go with him. I'm like, okay. And the guy just elbowed me in the face. I'm like, what the hell are you doing? And then again, so I got him in an arm bar and broke his arm, So it's like, and then a few of the guys were like, thank you. It's like, thank you. I didn't want to hurt him. The guy was just being an asshole. And I almost I couldn't even stop it because the way that he was just going after me, but Rodrigo's like, oh, he broke Andrew's ribs. He hurt this guy's shoulder. It's like, so why didn't you say something? He goes, oh, I know he would piss you off eventually. So I didn't have to say anything. But I'm like, I would like to know ahead of time, because Renzo just, if he wanted you to go light with the person, or if he wanted you to just give him a good taste of humble pie, So, I probably missed a bunch of them and a bunch of good ones too, because I remember one day everybody's just like, oh, Jeremy Horn was a famous MMA fighter back in the day. And he's like, oh, he went to Renzo's and he rolled with John, and John annihilated him. It's like, I'm like, oh shit, I missed that. I wasn't there that day, So then the funny thing is too, with the documentary, The Legacy with Renzo, that was those days. So you'd always have people just coming up and just saying, and Renzo's just like, come on, you don't have to wear a gi, just get on the mat. Because the thing is, it's like, we just wanted to be able to do jiu-jitsu, whether it's gi, no gi. Back then it wasn't MMA, it was no holds barred, And then the funny thing that Renzo used to do, where maybe some people didn't like it, but it was a fighting school. So this was in the beginning, the first school, where you have 3 guys put on boxing gloves, and everybody would go line up against the wall. So the thing you had to do is take down the guy. You can't hit him, but he could hit you. He was trying to box. You had to try to move as best as you can and take the person down. Once you took him down and you held him down, you get up and you had another one and another one. So you would have 3 people you have to take down trying to take your head off. So, we would do all that type of stuff, which now people are like, oh my God, that's crazy and that's barbaric. But we were all, trained to be fighters back then, so it was just an amazing time to be there, because it's just, you said the evolution of jiu-jitsu. I remember when somebody goes, have you seen the butterfly guard? We're like, what's that? Have you seen the spider guard? what's that? It's like, it's just like, this is the inception of the transformation of jiu-jitsu to what it is now. Now it's, I mean, the way it's evolved the last decade is unbelievable, but we were there when all these terms were just brand new. I mean, even the North and South position at one point, we didn't know what the hell to call that. You can't say, oh, the 69 position, that's not for jiu-jitsu, So you're like, what is this? And then somebody finally says, oh, North and South. We're like, oh, thank God, that sounds so much better. So at that time, we didn't have all these names. Now you have squid guard, octopus guard, and just so many things. Back then, it was just the butterfly guard. Ooh, oh, the spider guard. It's like everything's evolved so much, and it's funny where, of course, once it comes to America, it just explodes. But the thing that happened is, I feel, is that Renzo was teaching all of us the real jiu-jitsu from the very beginning, because I know what I learned the first month at jiu-jitsu, some black belts still don't know. That didn't learn from Renzo. So a lot of schools had to start to up their game to catch up to what we were doing and learning, So it was an amazing time. I remember the New York City Grappling Challenge. You had, I think, Nick, Sarah, Matt, Sarah, Rodrigo Gracie, Ricardo Almeida, his brother Flavio, and they all went against Lloyd Irving's guys, the soldiers of submission, and it was insane, but it was great. It was a great time. And it's like, I know from what we experienced from Lloyd's school and what he experienced from ours, that upped our game also. And then other people couldn't, do jiu-jitsu where they're not sharing enough, because if your students can't even compete against us, you're doing them a disservice. So from somebody starting to share the real jiu-jitsu, everybody else had to start to try to catch up, especially in America. Brazil was, a totally different entity, but back then you didn't have many East Coast schools because, jiu-jitsu originated in California for America, with Horion and Hoyce and everybody. So, yeah. Renzo's showing us. And another thing with Renzo is like, when he first came here, or I first started, he didn't have many people that he could train with that was good. Usually the people he tried to get were the best wrestlers from Hofstra or New Jersey, because those guys were tough and they at least had a good base. So the thing is, Renzo, he even says, all I had was white belts and blue belts, and yeah, Matt's a purple belt, but it's like overall, the density of the students were very low level. So it's like, he had to get us to a certain point where we were good enough to give him a little bit of competition. Not that we're going to do much against him, but at least more than the average person. So, that made a lot of other schools start to change too, because it's like, okay, we're not teaching you the real jiu-jitsu. It's like, now we have no choice because we're going to lose students. So that really made an impact on the jiu-jitsu community, especially in the East Coast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. I mean, it's just crazy how everything has changed, man. And I mean, I have no words, to be honest, man. It's a blessing to see how everything, and how everything has been going through, and by the way, Keith, I wanted to ask you also about Hyan, the brother of Renzo. He was definitely around, during those days. And man, how was your experience with him?
Like, I never got to train with Hyan, but
you never met him?
No, I met him, but Hyan didn't really speak English.
Mm.
So, I never really got to communicate with him, but just, he was 100% intense all the time. That's all I could definitely say. And that's one thing that Renzo said a long time ago. He goes, if I could have like this from Half and this from Hyan, I would be invincible. Because Renzo's like the sweet, nicer one out of definitely the brothers, So they all, even like Renzo in the video where Renzo's going with Hyan, it's supposed to be a light roll.
Oh.
It didn't work out that way,
Yeah, man, that role, man, when I saw that for the first time, I was like, wow, man, that's a fight, man. That's a fight, you know. And everybody would get out of the way, you know. Like
Oh, you had no choice.
Carlos said, told me, man, you know, that like when you know you guys were rolling or something, and there was like a hardcore, you know, like Henzo with high end, that they would go at it. Like everybody would like move to the side and let them just roll and just start
Oh, yes.
watching.
Yeah, because the thing is too, it's like, you know, they're both such high level. When are you going to get to see something like this for free and without traveling? There was no YouTuber or any of this stuff in the end. So it's like, wow, we got, them going at it. It's like nobody cared about training whenever that stuff went off. It's like everybody just stopped and made room for them and just watched, and that's another thing with Henzo, high end and health. It's like they have a very aggressive style of jiu-jitsu. Like Hoist is very passive. If you start to put, how they fight, Hoist got a little more aggressive towards the end, but Hoist is very passive compared to how they were. Like Half and Henzo take it to you. It wasn't passive jiu-jitsu where it's like, oh, I'll offset you. It's like, I'm going to reverse it. I'm going to get on top and I'm going to beat the hell out of you. So their jiu-jitsu is a very aggressive style, especially for back in those days. Now, a lot of stuff is more aggressive because there's so much more opportunity with all the different, sweeping systems and all that other stuff. But back then there wasn't much of it. So they were the ones that really took jiu-jitsu and made it more of an aggressive style.
Wow. Yeah, man. It's for me personally, you know, those like Henzo, you know, a lot, well, alongside with Hickson, you know, I think they have like the best like style, you know. Hickson, like the thing that makes Hickson unique is like the invisible jiu-jitsu and the whole self-defense aspect. Like he's focusing a lot on that, you know, and that's something I really like, you
And
know,
it's important
applaud. Yeah,
because
exactly.
I know a lot of people who are brown belts and black belts that don't know how to get out of a simple wrist grab. So it's like, and the thing is too, it's like, I'm not a Gracie, but it's like for me to teach anything that represents them, it's like I have to do the system justice. So to not know that to me is shocking, and then the thing is, like my jiu-jitsu idols is Hickson, Henzo, and Jean-Jacques Machado. That just happens to be mine. I know that now everybody has new people because of new people growing up, but to me, they're the Jedi Masters. And the thing is with Henzo, he was around Hickson so much. So a lot of stuff that is like just amazing. Henzo would say, yeah, I got this from Hickson. And it's just like, it's just something that's so simple and subtle, but so powerful. And that's like the invisible jiu-jitsu. And a lot of people are not learning certain things that make their jiu-jitsu better because now it's becoming more of an athletic thing where people are using more strength and stuff. And it's like, you have to go back to the original, like Elio and Carlson, they were small guys. So it's like, if your jiu-jitsu could work, with no strength or the least amount possible, of course, if you're stronger, it's going to be better, where you could be more forceful, I guess, but you should still always come back to the techniques, and that's one thing with Carlson Gracie, his team, he had a lot of big guys on his team. Mario Sperry, Bustamante, all these guys were big, athletic, and amazing at jiu-jitsu. So of course, those things make a difference. But when it comes to like self-defense and stuff, I know one of my friends took a private with somebody who's a brown belt, and he doesn't want to learn jiu-jitsu at all. He just wants to learn some self-defense. Somebody grabs your neck, somebody grabs your wrist. The guy was showing him competition stuff because the guy had no clue what to do. And he didn't want to lose that private because he needed the money. And then my friend who was his father was my boxing coach. His father's a professional boxing coach when I was a teenager. So, because I boxed for a long time as a kid. So I'm like, let me see, Dave, let me see what you learned. I'm like, why did he teach you that? That's not for self-defense. That's, for no gi stuff. He's like, well, I was like, oh man. I go, what did he? He goes, well, if somebody grabs you from behind. I'm like, yeah, you're not going to do that. So some people are not going to say what they don't know. They need to make money. But at the same time, it's just like, you're a brown belt. How do you not know the most basic Gracie Jiu-jitsu stuff? So, you know, that's up to somebody's integrity. You know, that's for sure. So if somebody thinks they don't need it, but now if you're teaching, you should tell the people, okay, we don't do self-defense here. At least let them know that. Because some people do join some schools thinking they're going to learn the self-defense. And next thing you know, it's a 105-pound girl rolling with a 250-pound guy. And she's like, what the hell's going on here? It's like, I wanted to learn self-defense. It's like, well, I'm on top of you, right? You have to defend yourself. It's like, yeah, that's not the way it should be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody who's a cop, somebody who's a bouncer. I mean, like John was a bouncer. Like when John, you know, when I first met John, you know, they didn't call him John Danaher. They called him Big John because he, you know, more into the bodybuilding stuff as a bouncer. And then he started to shrink a little bit more because he's getting injured, where he started doing just more jiu-jitsu, where they called New Zealand John. You know, so it's like all these things. I know John's gonna probably come out with a self-defense course, but for sure, the self-defense stuff, it's becoming a lost art. And I know that seems to impact Hickson a lot. That's why he's doing the Global Jiu-Jitsu Federation, because he wants that to be out there, because that's the basis of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. You know, if you can learn throws and stuff, but once if somebody just grabs your arm and you don't want to hit them, you just want to break the grip. You don't know how, you know, unless you do an arm drag to a takedown. It's like, that needs to be the basis. And I know, you know, the Upper West Side School with Luca, I know he incorporates that, which is important, because now you're empowering people, because it's like, okay, I get into a fight, I don't want to be on my back and have somebody in between my legs. I want to subdue them, take them down, and wait till the police or somebody comes to help me. And some people aren't having that type of ability, especially if you go in and you're a cop or you're a bouncer and you're like, okay, you know, somebody tries to grab my gun and stuff, what do? Jump guard. You know, it's like, you're not going to do that. You know, there's a couple of fights you could see with cops where the cop doesn't know what to do, and the guy goes for a guillotine. And the thing is, the guy didn't know how to do it right, so he didn't choke the cop out. But the cop should have known how to defend himself and all these other things. So, you know, there's just, with the self-defense thing, I just feel like most people are like, oh, that's kind of like, I don't need that. That's easy. Who cares? I'm not going to use that. But you never know. And plus, once if you don't want to fight, it's easy to disengage if you know the self-defense, and to de-escalate the situation where the person could know you're dangerous and you didn't have to hurt the person or take them down. Because God forbid you take somebody down, you don't know if they have friends. I used to fight a lot as a kid in the streets. I would have to fight sometimes 2 people at once. There's no way I'm taking the person down and mounting them because somebody's going to come and hit me in the head with a bat. You know, so all these other things, you know, need to be thought of. But we live in such an environment now where, you know, what happened in Brazil originally and here back in the 80s and 90s, nobody's fighting in the street anymore. So nobody knows what self-defense is needed for, you know, because everybody is crying from a Twitter post.
Yeah.
You know?
Hey, now that I have the chance, man, since you're a, you know, New Yorker, man, how you know, how was life like back in the day in New York and right now? Because, you know, I've heard a lot of stuff that like in the 80s and the 90s, you know, like it was like crashing, like everything, like a lot, yeah, it was like chaos, you know, and like now it's like more calm. But now with the COVID thing as well, it's like getting like again, you know, since you're a New Yorker, man, I gotta ask you that, man. And I'm interested, like I always wanted to go live in New York, you know, when I'm done with college. You know, it's a city that I really like.
Well, growing up, it's like, you know, it was very different then. No, everybody was outside. You didn't have internet. You didn't even have a computer. No such thing as cell phones. You had maybe, you know, 6, 7 TV channels. You didn't have cable TV. So most people would be bored as hell at home. So everybody's outside doing stuff. So pretty much everybody was in the streets. So all the neighborhood kids and everything. And next thing you know, you just can't help confrontation. Somebody doesn't like the way you look. They don't like the way you dress. They don't like your hair, whatever it is. Somebody's going to start a fight with you. So next thing you know, it's like, I didn't have an older brother because any of my friends had an older brother. Nobody bothered him because it's like, oh, you're going to start with Richie. Do you know his brother, John? They're like, oh shit. I didn't have an older brother. So they're not going to mess with my friend Richie or my friend, Jack, because they have older brothers. So they're going to come fight me because I have no older brother to defend me. So I used to fight so much. And the thing is, it wasn't fair. You'd have one person start a fight and somebody jump you. And, I had an incident where I saved somebody's life when I was 16, a racial incident with baseball bats, where one guy had a bat and then I was waiting for him to swing so I could grab him and clinch. And then 2 baseball bats came out of the circle towards my face. I moved out of the way, hit me in the shoulder, and another one came right towards my teeth and I blocked it, but my arm went dead. But otherwise I would have lost all my teeth, and it's just like, I went home, my arm is dead. It's like, oh my God. I'm like, it's just part of life here, So I can't imagine what it was like in Brazil, but it probably was similar because it was just, there's an old movie called The Warriors, right? You have all these different gangs. And of course, in the movie, they're dressed up in different outfits, but in New York, if you're from this part or that part, it's like, the 168th Street Boys, the TFS, that's like, people fight all the time. You go into the wrong neighborhood, it's like you're going to probably end up fighting. So I grew up fighting a lot. And the thing is that I felt comfortable because I boxed, I did Muay Thai and all that stuff, but I had no grappling background. I remember one of my friends, he'd start with me. So we had a handful of fights, but he kicked my ass one time and he got on top of me and I couldn't get him off. So I remember with jiu-jitsu, I was 16 years old. I was boxing. I was doing Wing Chun, Kung Fu, and Jeet Kune Do because martial arts has been my whole life, because I wanted to find a system that worked. So one of my friends who's like 10 years older, he's like, Jeet, have you ever heard of the Gracies? I'm like, I don't know. What is that? He's like, Gracie's in action. He's like, yeah, there's these guys from Brazil that people will come and challenge them and they'll kick their ass and they don't lose. I go, no way. He goes, I have it on video. He goes, I'll lend you my VHS tape. I take that thing, I go home. I found my soulmate for jiu-jitsu right away. I was like, it was mostly hoist fighting, some Hickson stuff. It showed Renzo and House first fight, in the ring in Brazil. And I'm just like, where do I learn this? It's like, we don't have that here. I'm like, shit. It's like, I go, if that ever comes here. And I remember I was learning Wing Chun Kung Fu, my teacher, he's like, oh, if jiu-jitsu ever comes here, I'm learning it. And he was a master in Kung Fu. He's like, and he did learn it once it came here, not from Renzo, but somewhere else. But right away, I watched that. And then maybe only a few months later is the first UFC. So I remember, Ultimate Fighting Championships, I go, oh my God, there's Royce Gracie. I'm like, he's going to probably win. And then, family members are like, what do you know? I go, trust me, let's see. And then when he won, they were like, holy shit. They're just like, well, that's coincidence. I go, no way, that's science. And I go, unfortunately, it's not here. I go, but one day if I'm able to, I'm going to learn it. And then when I was in the Marines in California, the reason why I went to the Dan Inosanto Academy is because Horion and Hickson School wouldn't let me go there every other week. Cause like, well, to get good, you have to do once a week. But I'm like, I live 4 hours away one way. And I'm in a military where I have to do training where I can't. And I'm like, sorry. So in the Santo Academy, they were very good with me. We were like, oh, you could come every other week and do 2 classes back to back. And that's the reason why I even went there. And the funny thing is, Eric Paulson back then, that's when he fought in the World Combat Championships, which is what Renzo fought in, right? So I remember Eric Paulson had this long blonde hair. And this is a week before the fight. I go, you going to cut that thing off? He's like, no. I'm like, they could pull hair. He's like, I know, I'm fine. I go, all right. Next thing you know, the second fight against James Waring, he's dragging him literally around the ring by his hair, So I was like, wow, that's crazy. And then see Renzo fight for the first time. I'm like, he just plowed through everybody. Even like one guy was a wrestler that was definitely on steroids. Renzo just took him down and finished him easily. And I was just like, man, I want to learn this stuff. So I remember I only took 1 class with Horion, but I was like so in love with it. But I'm like, I can't afford it because of the money I was making in the Marines. I live too far. They won't let me come. So I was like, I can't learn jiu-jitsu. So when I came home, that's why it's like right away I went to Renzo's and, for years. I mean, I was going 5 days a week for years. And it was just like, right away I was in love. The first class, it's just, I knew it. My first class was with Matt because it was on a Saturday morning because I was still in the military. So I could only go on the weekend. And I was just sold, you know, but I remember seeing the Gracie in action tapes first before it was even the UFC. And I was like, how do I learn this stuff? It's like, this guy's a karate master, this guy's this, that, and they're all doing the same thing. Takedown, slaps them, rear naked choke. How is this a coincidence? It's not. You can see it's a real fight, you know. So that's what really wanted me to go learn jiu-jitsu back then. And I think a lot of people that came to Renzo, because, you know, I'm from New York, I live in Queens, I take the train, I go to Renzo's. You had people come from all over the world. You know, I know this Pat came from Canada. I forgot the guy's name who came from Israel. It's like you had people from all over coming to learn from Renzo. And I'm like, I knew it was special. I didn't know how special it was back then, you know, because sometimes, you know, you're like, oh, have you seen the Empire State Building, Statue of Liberty? It's like, no, I live in New York. You're like, why wouldn't you see that, you know? So because it's here
it every day.
Yeah. So it's like, you train at Renzo's. It's like, yeah, of course. Where else would I go? You know, so seeing all these people travel from all over. I mean, I think Sean Williams was from Indiana, you know, if I'm not mistaken. You know, he moved here just for jiu-jitsu. So it's like, you know, sometimes, you know, I appreciated everything, and I'm very thankful because Renzo doesn't know how much he's given me in my life, you know, just everything he's given. And it's just like, yeah, it's like now seeing what he's created, you know, through all of us, because all of us that teach are giving back to, unless it's, I have students that compete or not, but I know jiu-jitsu will help them with everything in life.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, man. It's, you know, I have no words.
I'm a big ambassador for jiu-jitsu. Somebody's like, oh, I want to learn martial arts. I go, well, why do you want to learn it? Oh, I want to learn for meditation. Go do Tai Chi. I want to do Tai Chi for what? Self-defense. Well, you should do jiu-jitsu then. You know? Yeah. And then the thing is too, what you said with the self-defense, a lot of people are like, oh, that's easy. Just do this and that. It's just like, there's a lot to it. That's why we'll say invisible jiu-jitsu. It's not that it's invisible. It's like you have to feel it done right to appreciate it. And that's another thing. We had Renzo, we had Rodrigo, we had Ricardo Almeida, you know, and then, so when you train with them, you felt the pressure, you felt everything, where it's like, they didn't have to say it. You appreciate it. And then you tried to mimic that with your jiu-jitsu. And then as you start to understand it and you could start to teach it, it just, you know, I had 4 guys that came to me that was a friend of mine, students, and they were blue belts for 6 years already. They weren't doing the most basic things correctly, you know? And then after training with me for 4 months, they all placed first place for the first time in their lives. You know, and it's just like, wow, you've been training for this long and you're not doing this right. You know, because if Renzo grabs you, he's doing it right every time, you know, it's Renzo. You know, so just having that and feeling stuff from them, it's just like, yeah, you start to really understand stuff. And that's the invisible aspect. But that comes from everything else, from the self-defense all the way through. You know, so when some people are like, oh, I don't care about that, I'm like, it's not that I'm an old school guy. I'm very flexible and open to everything, but it's like, that can't be lost, and it shouldn't be allowed to be lost.
Exactly.
That's the foundation.
Exactly. No, you're absolutely right, man. And that's the most important thing. Keith, man, I forgot to ask you, man, before, you know, we're 1.5 hours of podcast. Hey, it's perfect. But right now, man, are you owning a school, or what are you doing right now, like as far as teaching jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, I just try to help my friends. That's it. You know, I've had a lot of surgeries, so my body's not able to do a lot of things. I have a lot of titanium throughout my body, so I'm just trying to keep the knowledge alive, you know? So, and I love helping with the kids, because the kids are our future, you know? And if you could teach them and really teach them to handle jiu-jitsu, they could handle life. you know, because there's bullies, there's this, there's that, you know. So
Yeah.
like my thing is more focused on the kids myself, because I just get so much joy out of it, you know, and like helping women with the self-defense stuff.
That's hey,
Yeah.
that we need that. We need that, man. Because I think everybody should know, jiu-jitsu, because first of all, it's the most complete martial art, that there is. And it will definitely save your ass, like at least once in your life, and like not only like from a confrontation or something, but like also to deal with emotions and psychological things, like in your personal life as well. It really makes an impact in as a whole, into your life. uh with me, man, personally, like before, I was very like insecure with myself, and since I started, man, like my confidence has become like much better, and like I feel like more mature as well. And you know it helps me also like to go through a good path in life. It also made me choose the yeah, it made me choose the right path. And a lot of my of old friends that I have, they chose the bad path here in Spain. And I mean, now you see them, doing
Oh
some
yeah, yeah. Sure.
a job that they don't like, and they're not happy with their lives. And but it gives you discipline. That's the most important thing of
Well,
martial arts.
this reminds me of something kind of funny where when I got into the fire department, boys' night out. Let's just go to a bar and drink and hang out. So I go there and I order a seltzer, right? So the guy, he's like, "You don't drink?" I go, "No." He goes, "You get angry when you drink?" I go, "No." He goes, "You have a drinking problem?" I go, "No." I'm like, for a second, I'm like, "What the hell's wrong with me? What are you trying to find?" You know? And I'm like, "So what's wrong with you?" And I go, "Nothing. I don't drink. I don't do anything." And I'm like, so I remember going home and I'm like, "Yeah, why don't I do that?" And I go, "Because I love jujitsu." If I drink and party and do all that stuff, the next day I can't train. And for me back then, that was my whole life. That's all I cared about. I
Yeah,
ate a certain way, I worked out a certain way, I went running, I did yoga, I did the breathing exercises from yoga because of Hickson. He's the one who really introduced me to all that stuff a long time ago. And it's like jiu-jitsu is more important than partying and spending money on nonsense. It was
yeah,
more important for me because I loved being there. I love the environment, I love the challenge, and I love jiu-jitsu. To me, jiu-jitsu is a game of chess that's a chessboard that can move 360 degrees upside down and everything. So it's like, and that's why Renzo's like, there used to be a shirt saying jiu-jitsu is a thinking man's game. Yeah, you have to, it doesn't matter what you're into. It's like, you have to be able to think ahead of time and look at strategies to be good at jiu-jitsu besides learning the technique. Because you might know the technique, but if you can't link those things together, you're not going anywhere. So it's like,
exactly.
so yeah, definitely.
And also like the fact that you've been a Marine, man, uh, like it also gives you like that discipline, and that good, uh, like just don't go into a bad path. By the way, man, before leaving, like tell me, man, how's the life of a Marine, man? Since you've been one, now I would like to have the chance to ask you this.
Well, like
How did you get into it?
being in the military in general,
Yeah,
you're signing a blank check with your life. So if they cash the check, they do, and if they don't, you're lucky. You know what I mean? And some people come out of there, with a lot of injuries and stuff, and you see a lot of veterans who are wounded warriors with their, they lost legs and all these other things. It's definitely tragic to see that stuff. But everybody goes in to the military, especially the Marines, because they love not the country. It's like, oh, America's the best. It's like they love what it represents and the people that are part of it, you know. And if anything, if something happens, we're willing to risk our lives to keep the democracy and keep your freedom of speech, freedom of liking stuff, hating stuff. You know, it's like, as long as you're not hurting somebody, and that's a criminal thing, but it's like, we're ready to risk our lives for you to maintain that for what we love so much. So it's like, even in that, it's just, you have to be disciplined. Boot camps to shape you those 3 months. Yes, sir. No, sir. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. It's like, you know, jump. You just jump. And then if they tell you how high, then you try to figure that out. It's just like, you know, they have to condition you to just follow rules, follow orders, and then the ranking orders and all that other stuff. But it's like, it's a disciplined life, because every single day you're waking up at 5 a.m. to go running 5-6 miles. You know, it's like you're going training. I was in the desert for 3 months. I didn't shower for 3 months. I washed myself, but it's not the same as a shower. Yeah. You know, you're sleeping in the desert. There's scorpions, there's rattlesnakes, there's coyotes. It's like, it's freezing out in the winter. It's just like, you know, you learn how to deal with things, and you learn not to take the simple things for granted. It's like, you learn to really appreciate that, you know? So, and it's funny because all this stuff that I got from the Marines, the fire department, and jiu-jitsu, you know, I just finished writing a book that I'll get published next month on Amazon. It's called A Warrior in the World. So I talk about life in general, where it's like talking about discipline and taking responsibility and looking at things and having awareness of what you've created with yourself and your life and your environment and your friends. So it's like, it covers everything, because it's like, you have to be a warrior in the world to survive, you know. And it has nothing to do with violence. It's just being more aware, seeing if what they're telling you on the news, is it true? Is it propaganda? It's like, you know, it's like all these things where you could always keep, you know, grounded. And jiu-jitsu, the Marines, the fire department has given me all that stuff, you know. So that when I see people angry and hating somebody because they don't believe the same thing, it's like, well, that's your freedom. Why are you going to hate somebody? I've lost friends because of my political views. It's like, I don't care what your views are. I don't care. I don't care who you like, who you don't like. That's your freedom, you know. Yeah. But everything's become now a political identity, where it's like people are willing to die for that, like if it's a religion. Where, you know, all these things that I've seen, I just try to write stuff in this book where it's like, it helped bring people back to reality, you know, because life is short, right? It's like, you know, like Renzo, for sure, it's like, he's impacted us so much, whether he realizes it or not, because he was just himself. He never pretended to be anything else. Yeah. You know? And a lot of people now are not being honest with themselves. You know, it's like, oh, look at my Instagram. I'm always happy. I'm always traveling. I'm always eating amazing food.
That's bullshit.
Total bullshit. And the thing is, with jiu-jitsu, it cuts right through the bullshit, you know. And then being in the military, hopefully that does it for other people too. But I was always disciplined. You know, I started doing martial arts at 7 years old. I did Shotokan karate. Our teacher used to hit us. I never went to my mom and complained. When you said, hey, she'd kick you in the stomach, even though you're 7 years old. that was part of it back then, you know. And it's like, I wanted to go beat her because I wanted to do something like that, because I just loved it. And then with the military, it's funny, I have some close friends from the Marines, but jiu-jitsu, I've made friends that has lasted forever, that even if they didn't get past white belt, it's just like, you know, it's just like you create such friendships that are very honest with jiu-jitsu. You know, that's very rare to see anywhere else. That's for sure.
Wow. Yeah, man. And, you know, now that we were speaking about, like, you know, the military, man, I'm sure you've had many experiences, man. If you could tell me maybe one or two of them, you know, that have really like marked, like, that they have marked you, or like says, like, I mean, like, have you gone like, I guess you've been, well, you said you went to the desert.
No, that was where I was in 29 Palms, California.
Oh, okay. They never sent you like to.
We were gonna go to Kuwait when Saddam Hussein was by the border in October of '94. You know, things you can't forget. So in Kuwait, so I remember we were packed up and ready to go. and guys were flipping out. Some guys were deathly afraid, you know, and I was calm. I just called my mom and I was like, we're going, whatever happens, happens. This is what I signed up for. You know, it's like, I always had the samurai mentality, you know, because I used to love studying about Bushido and all that stuff. So it's like, you know, and that's why I'm very attracted to Hickson also for that reason, you know, for his philosophy, where thank God I never got to go overseas, because a lot of people who've come back have had a lot of health issues and stuff like that. Because a lot of times war isn't about who's right or wrong, it's about who's left. So now you're going to sometimes just create harm because of politics again, you know, but it's not about, you don't care if that person has a wife and kids. It's like, you want to survive. So I'm very fortunate I didn't get this to have any combat action, but in the fire department, it's the opposite. You see stuff every day because you're helping save people's lives, you know?
Yeah. And well, now that you mentioned it, like in the fire, as a firefighter, man, what experiences have you had, man? You know, like saving people's lives and all of that.
Well, like if I could compare it to jiu-jitsu, it's like you learn how to do an escape for an armbar, right? But you need the timing to do it. But while you're waiting for that second to do the escape, you're relaxing, right? So you're still in the moment and you're very present. The same thing has to be with whenever you go to a life-saving situation, whether it's just CPR, a fire, car accident, or motorcycle accident, it doesn't matter what it is. You know, it's like you always have to be like very present and calm so you could do the best that you can without your mind getting in the way. Because now if you start to overthink, if you start to get afraid, you have three choices: fight, flight, or freeze, right? So same thing with jiu-jitsu. You go against somebody you know is good. You could give it your best and you fight and you try, or you could just give up and let them finish you because you're so afraid of them. Or you could freeze where they just annihilate you, right? So
yeah,
the same thing with the fire department, you never know what you're going to until you get there. So you get a call, you say fire on the 3rd floor, and then you get there and then it could be something completely different. So it's like you always have to be prepared and rely on your training. You have to have confidence in your training. It all comes back to jiu-jitsu. It's the same thing. So it's like they've trained you so you could do everything and anything and have the best outcome. So it's like when you get there, you have to do what they call a size up. You have to look and know how many floors are in the building. You know, what's the situation? Is it a fire? Is it this end? And it's like you have to get that information like this. And then from there, you have to be in the moment so you could perform at the highest that you can, where you don't put your own brothers and sisters in jeopardy that are there to help also, you know? And I was at a fire once with somebody who's a big shit talker, and we're going into a room and it flashes over. So all the fire comes right out the door. He left me there. He just disappeared, you know? And I'm just like, and then one of the guys, Tim, he's like, don't worry, I heard him. He's like, I got your back, I got you. It's like, holy shit, it's like, this guy just left me here, you know? And it's just like, and that's the person who's the big shit talker, right? Yeah. So it's like, you always have to be present and aware. And it's not about being calm when you're not doing anything, but it's just being present. And then with that, you're able to react the right way, you know, because it's not only you're going into a dangerous environment, you hear people screaming. I mean, it's totally craziness all around you, where if you start to hear people screaming and this and that, you could get freaked out too, where it's like, now you freeze, you're of no use. You know, I remember going with this one firehouse. Usually wherever I would go, there'd be a lot of stuff that night, so people wouldn't want me to work there, you know. So I went to the quietest firehouse and we had a fire that night. So I remember we got put somewhere and I'm like, oh, we're gonna get something. So we get a fire in the house and the fire is in the basement. So when you open the kitchen door on the side, you see the fire coming, the flames coming up the stairs. You have to go down those. You have to go down the stairs and as fast as you can, because if you don't, you're gonna get caught and you're gonna get burnt or whatever else. You know, so it's like you have to just be present, and that's why the training is so important. Just like with jiu-jitsu, it's like everybody's like, oh, I want to learn this, I want to learn that. You only need a certain amount of moves and just drill them where they become reflexive. The fire department forces you to do that. You drill so much stuff over and over, because in a fire, it's just like if you're walking around with your eyes closed, you can't see anything. You know, maybe if
of
it's
course,
daytime
man.
and they took out all the windows, but otherwise you're like a blind person going into the most dangerous environment where you have to use the best you can, a sense of your touch, your hearing, but you have to be calm in such a way where you can really be open to all those things. Because another thing, when you're breathing with the mask on, it's not quiet. It's like Darth Vader. So you have this sound from just you breathing, and then everything else where you have to really like slow your breathing down, be really aware, try to hear, it's like you have to do a million things at once. But the thing is, you should have confidence in your training because they gave you everything that they could, just like Renzo has with jiu-jitsu. You know, so everything to me always comes back to jiu-jitsu because it just covers everything. Like if somebody even is training and they get really frustrated, don't get anything, it's like, well, why are you getting frustrated? You're a beginner. You just keep practicing, you know? So everything always comes back to jiu-jitsu. That's what's the most amazing thing about it. You know, that's what Renzo goes, you learn more about life and philosophy on the mats than you do at Harvard University. You know, and it's not propaganda.
Yeah, no, man, but like, yeah, like real life situations are the things that make you like more mature, and they make you learn real stuff, you know. I mean, I'm a college student, but I don't believe in it, you know. I'm just, you know, because I'm not the type of guy that starts something and leaves it, you know. And now that I'm almost done, you know, I'm just gonna finish it, and I'm still very young, so but yeah, man, I completely agree, man. Like you learn much more like by yourself, like investigating and asking and talking to people that are in, you know, involved in the things that you're interested in, and that's where the real knowledge, like, you know, it's like, and how I get it, at least, you know. But
Also, the same thing with jiu-jitsu. What's the most famous saying? A black belt is a white belt that never quits, right?
exactly.
And it's funny, when we all started training, you could ask John, you could ask Sean, you could ask anybody, you know, Matt and Nick were our pinnacles because it's like they're purple belts, and it's like they were like unicorns back then, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know if I could ever get the purple belt. Black belt, that's not even in my mind. Purple belt, I don't know if I'll ever even get, that's the hardest belt to get in jiu-jitsu anyway, but it's like, I'm never going to get there. But if you never quit, you will, you know, and that's life in general. It's like when things are hard and things don't go your way, you just have to have that type of mentality where you just never give up.
Yeah.
And it definitely teaches you that, you know? So, I mean, just you doing jiu-jitsu now, going to school, maybe you don't do good in a certain subject. Well, what could I do that jiu-jitsu? Oh, we would drill more. So know what? Put more time into studying that particular subject for that test. You know, so it just gives you all these amazing tools that it's hard to say until you do it, right? So if somebody says, oh, you want to do jiu-jitsu? Come here, come here. You're going to get all these things out of it. You're like, oh, that's bullshit. You're like, no, if you do jiu-jitsu, this is all the stuff. Nobody ever says that to you. But as you start to do it, all these things start to unfold and unravel for yourself to discover. You know, that's why it's like, oh, self-realization, self-discovery. Jiu-jitsu definitely is a platform for that.
Exactly. I agree 100%, man. 100%, man. But yeah, man, what time is it now here in Spain? We're 6 out, well, almost 1 a.m., man.
We've been going for almost 2 hours.
Yeah, man. Hey, but it's really cool, man. You know, the thing is, like before, you've seen my page of Instagram that I have of TodoBJJ.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I created that during like the quarantine, you know, and all of that during the lockdown, because, you know, I said, hey, you know, there's no Spanish jiu-jitsu page, you know, that, you know, helps to promote jiu-jitsu. So I'm just gonna start that. And then I started like a month, yeah, probably a month and a half later, I started doing like lives on Instagram, like podcasts. And then, you know, a little while after I started with the YouTube. But now, you know, I wanted to also, you know, bring all other people. You know, I think it's also interesting to bring, you know, people from other worlds. You know, a military guy, like it doesn't have to be jiu-jitsu. I'm gonna bring a lot of jiu-jitsu guys because it's my favorite subject, of course.
Yeah.
But now it's like more it's independent of my page. So
Okay.
so yeah, you're the first guest of my second season of podcast, and it's like in the new format, you know, and like the new independent podcast. So
Mhm.
you're
I'm honored for sure. And also the thing is, it's like everybody's so obsessed with wanting to know what this competitor does or that competitor does, and that's perfectly fine. But there's so many of us that this has been. I mean, jiu-jitsu, it's like been part of my life since
yeah.
November of 1996. I might not be famous, and
I
I don't
wasn't
have
even born yet, man.
I don't have a desire to be famous, but it's like
Nah,
it's
me
done so
neither,
for
man.
so many people where I think they need to, meet people where it's like, okay, you've been doing jiu-jitsu for this long. It's like, what should I expect from it? And it's one thing that you can't even put into words in a way, but it's so profound.
Yeah, man. And like the thing is, for me, man, when I invite people like you, like Tsunami, like Carl Massaro, like well, everybody in general, from each podcast, man, I learned something, and that's the reason, like my most strong reason to do it, to get to know people, and man, I've got to know like many people, especially of the United States. I invited them. They said, yeah, no problem, and you know, you make good friendships as well. And it's a beautiful thing. And also that we didn't mention it, like jiu-jitsu, man. Well, yeah, you mentioned it. You mentioned it. Sorry. You make like so many friends, man. Like for me personally, since I started jujitsu, man, I've made more friends maybe than in my entire life, man. It's just incredible.
It's the only thing that you could make friends from strangling and choking and hugging, right? Strangers. Yeah, it's like I've been to a bunch of weddings and all these things from people from jujitsu. It's like, yeah, it's an amazing thing, and the
Yeah,
friendships
man.
that you get are very genuine because people are getting. You have to have a sense of vulnerability to do jujitsu.
Exactly.
So it's an
Exactly,
amazing,
man.
and I thank Carlos for introducing me to you also. And I'm very thankful for you asking me to come on here too.
No, man. Thank you, man. I have a lot of admiration for the old school guys of Henzo. Like it's my like goal, to train in that academy. I've trained already there once.
Mhm.
Carlos tells me always like your dream has been accomplished already, but you just gotta go there and that's it. And man, to be honest, like I love your city, man, New York. I went like last December, and it's been the best travel of my life, and I really like that city, man. I really like it. I didn't go to the Bronx. It's the only part I didn't go because I had to choose or go to Henzo or go to the Bronx. But I
Yeah.
went to Queens to your borough, and it's beautiful, man. Like I went to Jackson Heights, and then I went to Flushing Meadows,
Hmm. Okay.
and love it, man. Which part of Queens you're at, Keith?
I'm in Kew Gardens, so my area is like not much going on, which I don't mind. But yeah, it's like Queen. I think Queens is supposed to be the biggest and most diverse melting pot in all the world. It's like you go to this, like in Jackson Heights, you go that block, it's all Indian food. You go 2 blocks down, all
Yeah,
Colombian stuff. You go this way, all Mexican stuff. You go this many miles that way, it's all Italian stuff. It's just like, you have just like everything here for sure.
yeah. In Astoria, I think a friend of mine went there, and he told me like you see a lot of like Greeks there, a lot of
Yeah,
people from Greeceland. And then
yeah.
in Jackson Heights, yeah, like you said, man, like I remember when I got the subway from Manhattan to Jackson Heights, and I step out of the subway, and like the first thing I see is like a cafe, you know, like all Colombian, man, all Colombian, and they
Yeah.
didn't even know English. They were just talking
No.
in Spanish, man. I said, oh,
Yeah.
okay, perfect. For me, I don't have any problem. I could live here, you know.
Yeah.
You
No,
know,
it's funny. My grandmother and my father and my uncles lived in Corona, which is the next one over from Jackson Heights.
uh-huh.
My grandmother was here at that time, she was here for already 40 years. She only knows yes, no, thank you, goodbye. Because
Wow.
she speaks Spanish only. And she's in a neighborhood where you don't have to speak English. And I don't speak Spanish. So my dad's like, I go, I feel bad. I can't speak to her. He goes, you feel bad. She should feel bad. She's been here for all these years and she doesn't speak a word, you know? So it's like, yeah, you go to Chinatown or Flushing and it's 100% Chinese or Korean where you could get around English. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy how you have so much diversity within short distances of each other.
Yeah, China. I was really impacted with Chinatown. You know, one moment it was like, I was like, man, am I in New York or am I in China? You know,
Yeah. It's
incredible. Like all Chinese. Yeah, I didn't even see nobody, you know, normal. I felt like, you know,
you're visiting another country.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And Little Italy, man. I was, you know, it used to be bigger before, right? Little Italy.
Well, the thing that ends up, I don't think it's changed much. Well, right now everything's crazy, but you know, sometimes they push people out for other businesses to try to make everything, you know, different. Where as that starts to change, you start to push out the people that were there or that, you know, like start that type of thing. They're trying to do that with Chinatown too and stuff like that. I hope it doesn't, because once everything looks the same, you lose the beauty of what it really is.
Yeah, exactly.
We're all amazing because we're all unique. If we were all the same, that would be really, really boring as shit. You know? Yeah. So.
And that's what also makes New York unique, man. Like all the contrast, you know, and yeah, like you see like all, you know, many types of people, you know, from many cultures, you know, and you know that's what makes it like special, you know, and you get to know like everyone, and you know you see like the good, the bad, but you know you get a good experience out of it. Keith?
Plus the connection on your end.
Oh,
It froze. Yes, it's okay.
Okay. Did you hear what I said?
No, it froze at that point.
Oh, it froze. Okay. Well, no, I like the culture in New York is just so diverse, you know. So like, yeah, you just get like a good uh, experience out of it, you know, and you learn a lot of stuff, you know. That's the thing that I.
Sorry, fast. I remember there's a quick story when one of my friends, Edgar King, he in the Marines, he was on the boxing team, so he was from Tennessee, right? So
okay.
I remember at one point he goes to me, he goes, "Oh, you don't mind like this?" And then I go, "What do you mean?" And I was with my wife at the time, who's mixed. We're all mixed because we're from New York. And he's like, "You don't mind? I'm black. She's white." I was like, "I don't give a shit. I'm from New York." He's like, "I'm from Tennessee." Oh man! So I remember once we went to go do something, and we went to get gas, and I went in to pay, and I come out, and he's talking to this guy, and this guy has a VHS tape because it was back a long time ago, and it's a VHS tape of like The Little Mermaid, you know, and he has a daughter. So I go, "What are you doing?" The guy's like, "Oh, he's trying to sell me this tape." I go, "How much?" It was $14.99. I go, "That's on the label. Like, we're not paying you that. We're not paying that in the street." I go, "Once if it's not the tape or if it's broken, we can't return it." I go, "I'll give you $5 for it." He's like, "Oh man, come on, man." I'm like, "Yeah, $5 or get the hell out of here." He's like, "All right." And then my friend's like, "I was about to pay $15 for it." And the guy, before the guy leaves, he goes, "Man, where are you from?" I go, "New York." He goes, "Shit." and he took his $5 and he walked away. My friend from Tennessee, he doesn't know the guy's a crackhead. He doesn't know anything. He's just like, you know, unfortunately we're used to all that here with people trying to scam you. So he was just like, man, I just got this for $5. I go, well, I hope it works because that's a gamble. It doesn't mean that it's going to work. I go, but at least you didn't pay $15 for it.
Yeah.
You know,
wow, man.
You know, you get a lot of experiences here. And I think that's one thing with Renzo. It's like he fell in love with here right away. And one thing back to Renzo is like all of us that have been around him long enough all carry a piece of him in within our hearts. Because it's just the way that he is. It's just like, you know, we need more people like that, especially now more than ever.
Oh, yeah, man. Now, with all, you know, this crazy, you know, like this craziness and like the people, man, you know. Yeah, I mean, I saw an article that they were calling Renzo a Nazi and all of that, you know, because he's.
I've already heard of. Yeah. You know, it's just.
They're just assholes, man. They're assholes.
Well, like Gordon Ryan says, right? Haters are gonna hate. So
of course.
The whole thing now is a cancel culture. So they go, oh look, Renzo said this. He's a Nazi. If that's what you want to believe.
With Trump as well.
All of us that have been around him for so long, no, that's the biggest bunch of bullshit. You know, so if that's what somebody wants to believe, you know what? Don't go train there. Not my loss.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, I've heard it where I'm like, Renzo, it's like, you know, also in jiu-jitsu, some of us get nicknames, some of us don't, right? John is Tsunami, right? Not because he's a petite guy, right? So not a big deal. But then it's like, okay, we have Puerto Rican Rob, we have Black Rob, we have this one. It's like, nobody got offended. It's just, it's easier to say instead of you say, hey, Rob, and then 10 guys look back like, hey, which one? You know, now it's just like, oh, that's offensive. That's racist. It's like, that's your problem. If you think that everything is racist, you must be the racist. You know, so when somebody brings up something like that with Renzo, I'm just like, you know what? I don't even need to engage with that person because obviously they don't know him and they don't deserve to. You know?
Yeah, just so stupid, man. So
somebody bring that up to me recently too, who's a black belt, and I had nothing to say. It's like, that's what you want to believe. You never met him a day in your life, but you read this article, and I'm not going to even say the site because I don't want to even give them any publicity. You know? But yeah, some people you're not going to change. You can't. The only person you could change in this world is yourself. You know, and if somebody brings negativity to you, you don't need to give them your energy or your time. You know,
no, it's not worth it. Not worth it. You know, but fortunately, in martial arts, you don't see that many. You know, as if we compare like to society, you know.
Well, martial arts is a double-edged sword too. It could make you a nice, giving, aware person, or it could make you an egomaniac also. I've seen both, where somebody gets to a certain level, instead of being nicer and humble and more relaxed because they're more confident, you know, it's like right away, it's, oh man, I could kick everybody's ass. It's like, you know, that's not the way it should be.
That's not the way.
That's that person's problem, you know, not ours.
Exactly.
And then just like if there's somebody like that at the academy, you don't have to roll with them. You don't have to train with them. You know what I mean? It's unfortunate, but there's always going to be that type of person in every single academy, you know?
True. Exactly, man. So, hey, Keith, man, we're going to wrap this up, bro. First of all, man, I want to thank you. I had a blast talking to you, man. And yeah, thank you, my good brother, Carlos Klein, as well, for putting me in contact with Mr. Keith Villanueva. And man, I hope to, when I go to New York, man, I'll definitely hit you up, man. And since you're from Queens, you know, you know, like I said, I love that place, and we'll definitely go eat with. Hopefully, Carlos comes as well, man, and we go with Tsunami. We reunite, and yeah, man,
we'll make it a family reunion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, man. So, man, I appreciate the time that you put to do this podcast with me, man. And yeah, man, wish you nothing but the best.
Thank you, man. Thank you so
All right,
much,
man. Peace, man. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.